Hey everyone, this is Chris. Welcome back to the channel. So, unfortunately, today much of the headlines is coming out of China, and it's all bad news. So, I certainly expect the Chinese stocks to have some pressure today, and I want to go over these things, and so that you know what's going on as well. I want to start with this. This is actually the Shanghai Ikea. I've been to the Ikea in Shenzhen, not to the one in Shanghai. And true story, I met a friend, or made a friend, I should say, at the IKEA in Shenzhen that works at Tencent. So that's a sort of tidbit, and I used to go there all the time for lunch. So lunch at IKEA in the one in Shenzhen is really fun. I'm sure the Shanghai one is fun as well. And then for real, some of these IKEAs in China, they're really quite nice. Now the reason why I'm mentioning this is that they had a COVID scare. Basically, they announced over the intercom that they were going to lock down the store because some people were tested positive for COVID. And just ask yourself, would you want to be trapped in an IKEA in Shanghai? And essentially, this is for real, is the people in the hazmat suits, and the government comes and basically wants to close you in. Of course, you wouldn't want to be trapped in there. So a bunch of people made a run for the exits, which you'll see here, and basically pushed their way through the security, and then the rest were actually trapped in the building. It's pretty crazy. It's like something you see in the movies. And ultimately, what ended up happening is that the people were locked into the IKEA from 8 o'clock was when the announcement was made, essentially, and locked in there until midnight, and then later sent to hotels, basically to quarantine everyone. So the situation in China still remains tense, I guess is the right word to say, in terms of this zero COVID policy. I can just tell you in the USA, it feels like everything's pretty much open. Here in Korea, people are still wearing masks, and there's still regulations a bit. I'm just telling you guys. And then in China, though, they're much more strict. So that is certainly something that's been weighing on the economy. If people don't want to get trapped in IKEA or get trapped in these kind of situations, they're just gonna either cut back on their shopping entirely or just shop online. The other thing is too, this is the other big headline. It's been reported that China Air might be delisted from the U.S. stock exchange. Basically, as it seems right now, companies that are heavily government owned or state owned in China, and also that are thinly traded here in the USA, face a much larger risk of delisting. So as of yet, something like, say, an Alibaba, these are popular stocks, aren't necessarily fit into that kind of category, right? Again, it'd be a stock that's thinly traded in the USA and a stock that is heavily owned by a state. Now, however, here's the issue with the Chinese stocks, and I've been repeating this, guys, all along to you, is oftentimes almost every company has some sort of state interest, meaning politicians' money are in these things. And with the way U.S. System is set up, we want full disclosure of who's on your board, where is the money flowing, etc. And there are always politicians in U.S. and in China, it doesn't matter whatever country, that want to keep their financial info secret, basically. And in regards to what's going to happen with these things, I always say the same thing. If you want to, put money in the Chinese stock market, I would just say limit your risk. Yes, recently there's been a nice rally of these things with many stocks, but high risk, high reward. That's sort of how this game is played, and you can do well if you manage your risk. So I'm just warning you guys. It seems like the risk has definitely increased today, looking at all these headlines. The other one that happened as well is the Bank of China essentially lowered interest rates by not that much, but it was 10 basis points, and it was a surprise. Usually these kind of things are telegraphed, because any kind of movement in interest rates in a essentially a large economy, and this is China is the second largest economy in the world, has a big effect on things, right? So we're doing these crazy moves like 75 basis points, this sort of thing, and 10 may not seem like much, but in China, when this is a surprise to everyone, like, hey, surprise, we're going to change interest rates. Just imagine what that would do to our markets if one day, because the way our work is, like, we know ahead of time of when the FOMC is going to have a meeting. We have a general idea, like they talk about for weeks in advance of this is what we think it's going to be. But imagine just one day we wake up and they say, surprise, and Federal Jerome Powell comes out and says, hey, everyone, we're going to mess with the interest rates. People would be a little bit how can I say, shock the market. That's the best way to put it. And the basic gist of it is that they're lowering interest, meaning that they're worried that economic growth is slowing, and so they're trying to stimulate the economy. That's the basic gist of it. Is the other headline too coming out is we may not still have an end or a conclusion to the Evergrande situation. Basically, if you guys remember the 0809 crisis, it was just a series of bad debts with domino, right? And that's essentially what's going on in China. So it seems like, though, the bad debts domino things is happening in slower motion, or another way to put it is the information is being covered up more than we realize. So I remember hearing about this. This was like I think it was it last summer already. Do you guys probably remember this? And I was making videos about it, and it was like a huge issue. We were wondering if it was going to crash our markets, and then suddenly news just kept flowing. Sorry, just kept coming out, and then just stopped flowing all of a sudden about Evergrande. And occasionally you'll get some news, like there was one we did. I think I want to say a month ago, and it was. And I remember it was in the Henan province, and this is one of the poor districts where essentially there was a couple banks that just took everyone's money and ran away. This kind of situation could end up being happening again, but on a much larger scale. We just don't know. Just every time things come out, it's not like we hear positive news from China regarding this whole banking situation and real estate. It's just that we get no news, and so when the news does come out, it does seem to be negative. So again, this is an example of that. Also, too, Tanya, the news just keeps getting worse and worse. So the U.S. sent another delegation to Taiwan. This is the second one after or the two in a row, but another one after the Pelosi visit. So another one, and then basically the Chinese military said, "Hey, everyone, we're not happy with what you're doing with Taiwan. We're going to be doing more patrols on our military around Taiwan, and just to show that we're strong." Now, if the Chinese government and the Chinese economy ends up falling, what the U.S. does now, what U.S. often does, and people make the joke or make the case, however you want to say it, that in economic times are bad, the USA starts a war to try to stimulate industry. Who knows if China ends up doing those kind of things? I don't know. I guess I could say I'm 50-50 on this thing. Now sort of assuming that you don't want mutual destruction, there's no potentially incentive for China to start a conflict with the USA over Taiwan, because like I said, you don't necessarily want mutual destruction. However, if China is under the impression that, say, USA wouldn't take any military action the same way that we haven't really taken any in Ukraine. Yes, we've sent weapons to Ukraine, but we're not using U.S. soldiers. You guys know this. If they sort of get intel that states that point, then yeah, maybe they might do something. I hope not, and I won't make any predictions regarding Taiwan. I'll just say that you guys know this. I used to teach at Tsinghua University, which is a top school in China, and where many of the leadership goes. Essentially, all the presidents graduate from Tsinghua. One of the things is that very common in this sort of rhetoric is that they've been saying this for years, that Taiwan is part of China, and anything to the contrary sort of makes their government look weak, and it's one of those issues that they've kind of blocked themselves into a corner, so they have to stay strong on this, politically speaking. So hopefully there is no conflict, but when I put all these headlines together, I'm just like, for me personally, like I mentioned over and over again, if you're going to be in the Chinese stocks, just manage your risk. And I would say no more than 5 to 10%, depending on what your risk level is at. Some people might be, okay, you know what, 2% is enough, etc. But it is true, yeah, when everyone's scared, buy low, sell high, that kind of situation. I think this is a different situation than when, the famous quote of buff in the streets where there's blood in the streets. Me, personally, I'd be more apt to pick an American company because I'm not, like, afraid that, suddenly the Chinese government's going to affect that. I'll give you an example. So let's say, for the last, say, year, everyone's been hating on Disney or Starbucks. I would be more willing to take the bet on Disney or Starbucks coming back than I would be willing to take the bet on, say, that Chinese stocks won't be delisted. But that's just my opinion. I'd love to hear your guys' opinion of why you believe that the Chinese stocks are worth the bet. Normally the people would say is that we're betting on these stocks because growth in China is so great and there's so much potential, and et cetera, et cetera. I just don't see that in the numbers. It just seems like the growth in China is slowing, and we keep seeing numbers like youth unemployment is really high. It's something like 20%, which is essentially, we're saying 1 out of 5 young people in China are unable to find a job, which sort of bodes not so great for the future. And a lot of this was partly the pandemic, where during the pandemic no one was really hiring, right? And so you had all these young people coming out of school, out of college, and they couldn't find jobs, etc. And that sort of situation remains in place to where the growth just isn't there. So that's why the government sort of lowering interest rates as a surprise is a shock to everyone. So, we'll certainly see what happens today. I remain bearish on Chinese stocks. That's just how it is. And, if I were wanting to bet on, say, countries outside the USA, I personally would be betting on either Vietnam or India. And possibly, I say possibly, I just don't know enough about it, perfectly frank, countries in Africa. I think that's where the growth is going to be. So Southeast Asia, but Vietnam in particular, I think are opportunity, and then India, which I think has the most opportunity in the world. They're the fastest growing. So China is obviously a major market and, a big player in the world, but Just a lot of negative things, and I do get it though that when things look bad, time to start buying. But just for me, I want to manage my risk. So that's my thoughts on these things. Love to hear all your thoughts on this thing. What do you think about the IKEA situation in Shanghai? If someone came over the intercom and said, "Hey, everybody, we're locking down the store because we found out that there's 7 cases of COVID," would you stay in the building or would you try to make a run for the exits? Love to hear your opinion on that. So thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.